Good morning, happy Easter, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Greater Naples. It is a joy to have you with us this morning on this beautiful Easter morning here in Naples, Florida. I'm excited that Lan and Jeff are here to play with us. I'm hopeful that you're all comfortable and ready for a wonderful hour together in worship. My name is Tony Fisher, and I serve this congregation as its minister, gratefully, joyfully, gladly. Whether you have somehow stumbled across this service, this live stream service on the internet, or whether you've been a member for time immemorial, we welcome you here into this hour. Our mission statement says that we are a welcoming congregation, freely seeking intellectual and spiritual growth, that we strive to create a larger community of peace, justice, and love. Even in this time of separation, each of us is encouraged to grow spiritually in fellowship with others by joining in worship online or in our conversations online through Zoom. We welcome you into the spirit of that community and hope that you will continue to join us as we add more programs to our offerings during the week. Our traditional flower communion service will have to wait until we're back together again, but we hope you will continue again to commune together on this Easter morning through our virtual coffee house or in other ways. I've been asked to remind you, of course, that this is a time for our annual appeal for the Weekend Meals program, a wonderful program of the congregation to help feed hungry children over the weekends during the school year. We hope that you will go to our website, www.uunaples.org, and there find the Serve Others button and look for weekend meals and donate to that wonderful program. As always, we're happy that Lan Lam is here, our musical director, and she's joined today by Jeffrey Day, her husband, and wonderful violinists from the Naples Philharmonic to share their talents with us this morning. You will notice that we are without a screen in the background this morning. And as always, it seems, we have a little technical issue this morning. So much of the service, or not much, but some of the service that we prepared will have to wait for another time. Mary Borland, our religious educator, has created a wonderful time for all ages in which she tells about her hats and her Easter bonnet that she created today. And Joanne Swank, the worship associate schedule for this morning, also recorded both her welcome and the readings this morning. But we'll have to do without those as one piece of equipment has seemed to falter this morning. But undaunted, on Easter morning, we move ahead with the service. So I invite you to take a deep breath, as I need to do. Settle in this time together and join us in the spirit of worship as we open with our morning's prelude. So welcome, everyone, once again. Welcome to all who come to this moment with a weary spirit seeking comfort and hope. Welcome to all who come with hope already in your hearts. Welcome to all who enter this community space as a homecoming. Welcome to all who are seekers of a new faith. In this time together, may we be reminded that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to one another. As Jeff lights our chalice this morning, if you can remember, let's say the words of our chalice lighting. In the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment, we gather this day. May the flame we now kindle be to us a symbol of the unity we seek. And now, let's settle into a time of sharing. I'll ask Lan to play Spirit of Life twice through. The first time we can listen, the second we can sing, if you wish. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. We hold in our hearts on this day all those who are suffering from this pandemic, both those who have contracted the illness, those who are caring for them, those who have lost loved ones, and all of us who suffer together the loss of so many and such a difficult time. There are so many stories that we see in the news these days. Stories of people at risk. People who, in order to live, must continue to serve in their roles. Their important roles as farm worker, as bus drivers, as clerks in stores, as frontline healthcare workers. We hold them all in our hearts. Let's take a little time together in silence. We hold so much anxiety these days, so much in our shoulders or in our brows, wherever we hold that tension. Let's try to sit and let it ease away as we share some silence, and then a spoken meditation, and then a beautiful musical meditation. Spirit of life, God of our deepest understanding, we marvel and wonder at the gifts with which we have been graced, this planet, this life, the beauty of this place, the shared love and joy within this congregation and we are yet aware, painfully aware, that we live in a fragile world. We live in a fragile world where the difference between have and have not, between security and vulnerability, between complacence and wondering where it all went wrong is oh so slight. We live in a fragile world where tumult and uncertainty are written not only on the faces we see on our television screens, but in those we know, sitting next to us at home, within our own neighborhoods, and within this community. We live in a fragile world where we are all broken to one degree or another, where we all experience loss, where we all feel pain, where we all know regret. Spirit of life and love, as we gather in this season of Passover and Easter, fill us all with the compassion, the strength, the courage to overcome our anxieties and fears, move beyond our disagreements, and reach out our hearts in the spirit of gratitude and generosity. Stay with us now and always as we strive toward the goal of beloved community today and every day, here in this fragile world. Our first reading this morning comes from Archbishop Desmond Tutu, titled "Liberation is Costly." Liberation is costly. Even after the Lord had delivered the Israelites from Egypt, they had to travel through the desert. They had to bear the responsibilities and difficulties of freedom. There was starvation and thirst, and they kept complaining. They complained that their diet was monotonous. Many of them preferred the days of bondage and the flesh pots of Egypt. We must remember that liberation is costly. It needs unity. We must hold hands and refuse to be divided. We must be ready. Some of us will not see the day of our liberation physically, but those people will have contributed to the struggle. Let us be united. Let us be filled with hope. Let us be those who respect one another. This morning before the service began, I went outside and took some photographs of the garden and all the flowering bushes and plants that were out there, and I wove them into our opening sequence. And so you should know how beautiful our gardens and our grounds look this morning, a communion of flowers on Easter morning. Among those photographs, I took a picture of our new Purple Martin house or apartments that are just outside the sanctuary windows here. And there I could see Purple Martins up sitting on the perches at the houses. And we know, we've had photos of Purple Martin eggs in those pods. And so we have our own Easter eggs on Easter morning, and perhaps even a few fledgling Purple Martins to greet us with song when we return. For all this beauty that surrounds us, all this work that has gone into building this place, we hope that you will be generous in your giving. We can't pass the plate on these mornings in isolation, but we hope that you will take the opportunity to consider giving beyond your pledge, going to our website, www.uunaples.org, and find the pledge button in the upper right-hand corner, and pledge an amount that's suitable for you. If you wish, instead, you can create a place at home every Sunday to put your contributions to the plate. And then when we come back together again, bring that with you. And we'll all share in the bounty of this congregation. So for that and for the ongoing mission and future of this congregation, the morning's offering will be gratefully received as we appreciate once again the music of Lan Lam and Jeffrey Day. That was fabulous. Could you reprieve that at the end of the service, too? That would be great. Thank you. I was over there tapping my toe, realizing I might be interrupting the sound. Our second reading this morning is from the Reverend Richard Gilbert. It's titled, I Hope He'll Be Remembered. I hope he will be remembered, obscured by centuries of violence, clouded by countless creeds, dissected by 1,000 scholars, preached from 1,000,000 pulpits, mouthed by 1,000,000,000 lips, crucified by willful distortion and innocent ignorance. I hope he'll be remembered in simple, unadorned humanity. The sermon title today, since you can't see it on the screen, is Hope, Love, Liberation, and the Coronavirus. When I was very young, my anticipation of Easter was like that of many young children, looking forward to decorating Easter eggs and the Easter egg hunt bright and early on Easter morning with all the possibilities of sweets that entailed. I don't even think I minded going to church on Easter all that much, except for feeling a little uncomfortable in the new clothes my mom always seemed to buy us for the occasion. Sitting through a long sermon wasn't my idea of a great time either. But even early on, I think I loved the joyous aspect of both the liturgical music booming out of the great pipe organ of that church, and also the wonderful hymns we all sang. When I was really young, even in our mostly humanist congregation, we would sing, Christ the Lord is risen today, and lo, the day of days is here, each with their wonderful choruses of Alleluias. Or we might lift our voices to O Day of Light and Gladness. I wasn't sure how appropriate O Day of Light and Gladness would be on this particular Easter Sunday. In 1964, when the first Unitarian Universalist hymnal came out a few years after the merger of the two denominations, Christ the Lord was nowhere to be found in the new hymnal. So we sang, Lo, the earth awakes again, to the same tune, with all the same Alleluias, but evoking instead the wonder of the return of life in spring. It's pretty clear that the Easter holiday is one that Unitarians and even later Universalists struggled with the most. We became adept at pointing to the early pagan spring festivals as the root of the holiday, lifting up the mythological stories of those like Ostara, or the Greek goddess Persephone that celebrated the seasonal triumph of life over death, and from which the Christian mythology borrowed so liberally. The flower communion we usually share here at UUCGN on Easter morning is a wonderful ceremony created in 1923 by the Czechoslovakian Unitarian minister Norbert Čapek. And while it celebrates nature, beauty, diversity, and community, it wasn't created for Easter. Rather, we've adapted it and adopted it so that we have something to celebrate while the Christian world marks this most important day of the liturgical year. Many ministers, this one included, are more comfortable weaving the Jewish celebration of Passover into their sermon cycles, especially as the Exodus story is so important not only to the Jewish people, but also to Christianity and Islam, as well as being foundational to Western democracy. The Exodus story plays out over 4 of the 5 books of the Torah and speaks to God's liberation of the Hebrew people from bondage in Egypt and through the subsequent years of wandering in the desert. They escaped, so the story goes, as God unleashed the last of 10 plagues on Pharaoh and his people. The thing about this liberation was that it was not accomplished in one night, nor by a dash across a sea of reeds that Pharaoh and his chariots could not navigate. But it was a liberation that was costly, requiring many years of isolation in the wilderness. Time that a ragtag group of people needed in order to understand that this God that Moses spoke of expected right behavior from them. They were no longer subject to the whim of this God or that God, but to survive and reach the promised land, they needed to be united as a people and accept a God who demanded that they take responsibility for their own actions, for their own destiny. It's a story that weaves well into our own Unitarian Universalist ethic. It is also a story that has implications, I think, for how we might view the story of Good Friday and Easter. As early Unitarians and Universalists moved away from a theology of resurrection and the idea that Christ died for our sins, they looked to the simple but powerful words of this charismatic leader who had a surprising tendency to reach out with compassion to people on the margins. They read in his sermons how he tried to animate the old laws with the power of love. In the plain words of Jesus of Nazareth, wrote Theodore Parker, one of our early Unitarian ministers and heroes, Christianity is a simple thing, very simple. It is absolute pure morality, absolute pure religion, the love of man, the love of God, acting without reserve or hindrance. And yet, the teachings of this obscure wandering rabbi in Galilee would have been lost to the world had it not been for something more powerful than words. What could have inspired his followers to return to Jerusalem after his execution and find one another again? Those who had denied him that fateful night, those who had cowered on the edges of the crowd or scattered to the wind at his arrest. They hadn't wanted to hear him when he spoke of the suffering and pain to come. And now they were hurt, embarrassed perhaps, scared. What was it that made them return and begin anew? Perhaps it was that after they moved through the intense and immediate pain of loss, after the embarrassment had diminished, the embarrassment of realizing that the person of Jesus wasn't all they had built him up to be, that they understood who he really was and opened their hearts again to the reality of his life in theirs, that his love could live on in them. How they had shared many days and evenings together, and how he had given so much of himself in love. How he had taught that what was important was to belong to one another, to believe in one another, to reach out with compassion to those on the edges of society, to love your enemies as yourself, to do good work in the world, to be grateful for the bounty of creation, and to learn to share your gratitude. Perhaps, with their hearts cracked open by loss and recollection, the followers found within themselves the love, the power, the energy, and the hope to face a new reality, a new normal, with courage and the conviction that this kind of love, this kind of living must be shared and passed on. And like the Hebrews who eventually crossed the Jordan with an identity and a purpose different from that of the loose tribe that left the bondage of Egypt, this group too began to find hope and purpose to their living together without the leader who had brought them together. If there is a miracle in the Easter story, it is the survival of the early church and the story of love. The fact that this simple message has been mostly obscured and usurped, clouded, and hijacked is one of the great shames of history. As Richard Gilbert writes in another of his meditations, Easter is Paradox, love is real only when we give it away. Love hoarded melts as inevitably as spring snow. Easter in the time of coronavirus is a paradox all its own. As with Passover that began this past Wednesday, and with the month of Ramadan that begins in a couple of weeks, the three major religions are finding ways to celebrate holidays that are primarily communal in nature during an enforced time of social distancing. And while I have no doubt that new meanings will be found even as the old stories are shared over Zoom or Skype, I wonder how these new ways of being together will change who we are and how we will interact in the future. As we've entered our own wilderness and the combined grief of separation and loss, as the inequities of our society are revealed ever more clearly in the numbers of minorities affected and at risk, as the efficacy and motivations of our government are questioned, what do we need to learn to create our own new normal once the immediate crisis passes? How and when will we find liberation and hope? What new beginnings can we forge from the fracturing of the old norms? During the question and answer with the ministers' session that our membership committee hosted this past Thursday afternoon, I was asked how I was feeling about the effects of the virus. And after acknowledging that, like most of you, I have found the anxiety particularly draining, feeling tired at the end of the day, sleeping later in the morning, holding my anxiety here, I also expressed my primary fear, which is that we come out of this without learning anything. That we rush to try and get everything back to the old normal as soon as we can without taking the time to consider what might be a better way. This is true locally as it is globally. It is true within our congregation as it is in the aisles of Congress. What can we learn? How can we change? What role can we play in the coming new normal? And how can we apply the great lesson of love and acceptance and justice to all our notions of what we might become together? The Reverend Linda Susan Ulrich, one of my colleagues in ministry, also talks about the paradox of human existence, that while we much prefer our tidy, stable, comprehensible, and logical ways of getting through each day, of being safe, paradox is woven into the fabric of this particular universe we inhabit. Linda Susan writes, "Love and grief are inextricably linked, as are rage and sorrow, suffering and compassion, life and death. Time itself is both linear and cyclical. Each person's life traces a single arc, yet patterns emerge and reemerge. Fear always seems to return, anxiety too. And goodness knows terror finds its way back into the news. We always seem in need of help to roll back the big stones that block our way. Yet we also come back to Alleluia. We raise each other's spirits when our sacred places seem empty. We anoint each other. We engage in a demanding faith that asks us to love the next world into being today. We are joyful, even having considered all the facts. This season of Passover and Easter is once again upon us. How will we find our liberation? Will we learn, finally, that our own liberation is tied inextricably to the liberation of all the migrants, the farm workers, the bus drivers, the store clerks, the healthcare workers, all those pushed to the sides of our society? What will break us open to let love become real? I see within this congregation the seeds of caring, of connection, the possibilities of new ideas and new growth emerging even now. Your presence there on the other side of that camera is a testament to the latent power of this community. And for all that, I say, Alleluia. I hope you will look for possibilities of joining our online community this week. There's a wonderful Wednesday on Wednesday night. There'll be another Q&A with the minister this week. Those schedules and times will be published tomorrow. For now, I ask you to stay safe, stay at home, but send your heart out into the world. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Honor all beings. And have a wonderful Easter. Blessings to you all.